My name is Anna Whitmore. I'm 36 years old, a full-time agriculturalist, and the widow of a man who once turned fallow soil into a future. It's been 40 nights since Michael died in his sleep. The kind of quiet death that takes more than a man. It takes the air out of the house, the pulse out of the days. I still sit on the porch we built together, blanket around my shoulders, eyes on the stars he used to name. They say grief softens over time. But out here in the middle of nowhere, it doesn't soften, it settles. It seeps into wood, into soil, into skin. And tonight, under a sky wide and unblinking, I realize something. I'm not just mourning a husband. I'm mourning the life that only ever made sense when he was in it. Widow. A word that sums up my entire life. I am the reluctant heir to everything we built together and lost. They say the earth misses you, that it holds your weight, your breath, your pain. I used to think that was just city life romanticizing the countryside, but now I know better. Because every step I take on this farm echoes Michael. Every time the barn door creaks in the wind, I still half turn, expecting to see him mud on his boots, coffee in hand, that crooked smile, and his deep voice asking, "Have you checked the southeast corner?" The vines look thirsty. He's been gone for 8 months, but somehow the earth holds him better than the grave. Logic tells me to go, that I can't keep doing this alone. The numbers don't lie. The wheat is behind, the irrigation unreliable. The tractors need more than I can give. The workers, God bless them, don't know how to speak to me anymore. Their voices go soft, like I might crumble into bone and memory at the wrong word. Maybe I will. But what about my heart? It refuses to move. Because this place, it's more than land and debt. It's memory etched into the rhythm of the seasons. Michael didn't just love this land. He belonged to it. Every handprint on the fence, every note in the ledger, every curse-laced repair, it's all still here. He's still here. Leaving this farm would be tearing the last threads that bind me to him. My mother told me to sell. She meant well. Start over, she said. You don't owe this place your life, but what she called clean, I called empty. The land might be bleeding, but it's alive. And starting over somewhere else would be like wiping away a blackboard that still holds his fingerprints. So I stayed. Even though staying feels like a slow drowning most days. Every morning, I stand at the edge of the vineyard, our vineyard, and ask myself, what am I doing? Is this courage or stubbornness, hope or denial? Am I chasing the future or clinging to a ghost? At night, I sit beneath the dim kitchen light and try to make the numbers work. Spreadsheets, budgets, crop forecasts, they never balance. Not since he left. I stare at his handwriting in the ledger, those strong slanted letters, and I trace the curve of his lowercase r like a prayer, hoping he'll whisper a solution. Sometimes I talk to him. Whisper, Michael, if you're still here, give me a reason to stay. And then the wind shifts. The hawk cries on the barn roof. Joseph, the farm manager, arrives before sunrise with black coffee and quiet. They're not magic, but they're enough. There are days I want to scream at the sky, at Michael, at myself, for being left behind, for not leaving, for not knowing what comes next. But I buried that anger like a seed, and I hoped something would grow. I still wear my wedding ring, not because I think he'll come back, not because I'm frozen in time, but because memory is the only compass I trust right now. And even if the path ahead is blurry, I know this: I'm not ready to leave what we built, or the person I've become here. Maybe staying isn't the right thing to do. But for the first time, this choice, this stubborn, painful refusal, is mine. Not his, not my mother's, not the world's, mine. And maybe in a life I never asked to rebuild, that is where healing begins. Not with blank pages or new places, but by standing on sacred ground, dirt in my hands, and saying I still choose this. Even now. So I wake before dawn. I walk the fields. I count the vines like prayer beads. I lose sleep. I wear grief like a second skin. But I also plant, and wait, and hope. The battle between reason and longing still rages. But I'm still here, still standing, still Anna. It hit like a storm with no forecast, violent, consuming, utterly uninvited. No footsteps, no shadows. Just a knock, quiet, almost accidental at the back of the barn. Then silence. Heavy, watching. I moved toward it barefoot, the dirt cold beneath my heels. The wind carving through the thin flannel I hadn't bothered to button. But something deep inside me already knew this wasn't the wind. This wasn't nothing. The barn door shrieked as I pulled it open. I hadn't stepped into Michael's workroom since the funeral. I told myself it was sacred, that I needed time, that the smell of him lingering in the air and the calendar still stuck on April would undo me. And I was right. It did. But something else waited. The far cabinet. Always locked. Always off limits. The one I never questioned. Tools, he'd say. Chemicals. Dangerous things. But now it wasn't just curiosity pulling me forward. It was dread. Thick. Cold. Breathing down my neck. The lock gave way under the crowbar with a snap. Inside folders. Files. Medical reports. A name I didn't recognize, Philip. Age 6. Diagnosis, congenital heart defect. And then the photo. Michael crouched beside a boy with his eyes. His exact eyes. The kind of resemblance that lands like a blow to the chest. I stumbled back. Not dramatically, just enough to feel the breath ripped from my ribs. My hands trembled as I flipped through the rest. Dates, bank deposits, medical invoices, each one leading to a woman named Elizabeth Carr. Each one in my husband's handwriting, not from our joint account, a separate one, hidden. My throat locked. My pulse thundered in my ears. 10 years, 10 years of marriage. No secrets I believed. No children we had accepted. He said it was fate. Timing. Our work would be our legacy. Lies. Every file was a wound. A scar I hadn't earned, but now wore like a brand. And then, the note. Just one line scrawled on the bottom of a transfer form. If something happens to me, Anna deserves the truth. She'll know what to do. I dropped the paper. My knees hit the barn floor. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I broke in silence. The kind that shatters deeper than sound, like a tree splitting in the middle of the night with no one there to hear it fall. Everything inside me began to unravel. Michael had a son, not before me, during. A living, breathing piece of another life left behind for me to find, to hold, to carry. No instructions, no guide, just a trail of receipts and a name I had never been told. The betrayal didn't burn. It froze, cold and slow, until every part of me went numb. How do you grieve someone twice, once as a widow, then again as a fool? I pressed the photo to my chest and let the darkness rise around me, not to hide, but to feel, to absorb, to survive. Because whatever came next wasn't just grief. It was war, between memory and truth, between love and fury, between the woman I thought I was and the one I'd now have to become. The next morning, I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I didn't sit. I just stood barefoot in the kitchen, the file clenched in both hands, like it might burst into flames if I let go. It wasn't paper anymore. It was heat. It was noise. It was a life I never knew I was already tethered to. Philip, 6 years old, congenital heart defect, no emergency contact, but me the widow. The woman who thought she knew every corner of her husband's soul. The woman who didn't even know she was a stepmother. Michael had written it like a final order in a war he never prepared me for. Anna deserves the truth. She'll know what to do. But I didn't. God, I didn't. I didn't know what to do with a child born of another woman. A child conceived in secrecy. A child whose very existence shattered the fragile narrative I'd been surviving on. And yet he was innocent, fragile, sick, real. He was real. I opened the file again, half expecting it to vanish. Elizabeth Carr, mother. No living relatives. Phone number disconnected. Bank account closed. Gone. Erased like a footprint in mud. And the little boy, left behind, with me. The air grew heavy on my chest. I couldn't breathe, but I could move. Just enough. I dialed the number on the intake form. My voice cracked. This is Anna Whitmore. I'm listed as a secondary contact for Philip Carr. I need to know where he is. A pause. I braced for resistance. Questions, accusations. But when I said Michael Whitmore's name, something shifted. Like a code had been spoken. The woman on the other end softened. Gave me a clinic address in Lubbock. Said he was stable for now. But funds were low. Transfer imminent. I didn't pack. Didn't tell anyone. I grabbed my purse, shoved the file in the glove compartment and drove. 6 hours of silence, just the hum of the road, the howl of my thoughts, and a sky that refused to break no matter how hard I begged it to. By the time I arrived, I barely recognized myself. Pale, hollow-eyed, too much grief for one body. But they let me in. A nurse nodded like she already knew. Like maybe the boy had whispered my name in sleep. Philip, smaller than I'd imagined. Bones like twigs under paper skin, curled beneath blankets too heavy for him. Machines blinked beside him in soft, persistent rhythm, a lullaby of survival. And yet he was breathing. Still here, still fighting. And I broke. Not with rage, not even betrayal. I broke in love, raw, sudden, terrifying, but unmistakable. I reached out, took his hand. It was warm, so small it barely wrapped around my finger. He stirred, eyelids fluttered, then his voice scratchy, uncertain. Are you Miss Anna? I choked. Yes, I whispered. I'm someone who should have known you sooner. He smiled, tiny, tired, and I shattered. Every wall, every wound, every story I'd told myself just to survive Michael's death, and now his secret. I stayed. I didn't leave his side. I signed the consent forms with a shaking hand, called my accountant, liquidated what was left of our savings. Every cent. No questions. On the Guardian history line, I wrote Elizabeth's name. Beside current legal contact, I wrote mine. That night, when I whispered goodnight, I made a promise into the sterile sleeping quiet. I won't leave. I won't run. You are not a burden, Philip. You are not a mistake. Michael had left me a storm, a rupture, a betrayal I still couldn't name without trembling. But he'd also left me something else, whether out of guilt, trust, or desperate hope. He left me a reason. And that reason now wore hospital socks and smelled faintly of antiseptic and applesauce. That reason looked up at me with Michael's eyes. That reason, unexpected, uninvited, unwanted by the world, was mine, not by blood. But because love, when given a second chance, doesn't ask for permission, it roots. And this time, I wouldn't waste it. The road back to the farm felt endless, an old stretch of gravel now heavy with meaning. Not just because I was bringing home a boy, but because I was carrying the full weight of everything Michael had left unsaid. Grief, betrayal, memory. It all sat silently in the back seat beside Philip, packed neatly like fragile cargo. He slept through most of it, cheek pressed against the window, one arm curled around a small, stuffed bear. Not his bear, Michael's, I'd found it hidden in the same locked cabinet that held the truth, as if Michael had known someone would need something to hold when the world unraveled. As we crested the last hill, the farmhouse came into view. Familiar, yet not. The shutters blinked like they recognized me, unsure whether to welcome or brace. The dogs barked, stirred by something new in the wind. And standing on the porch, Joseph watched. He saw the boy. He didn't flinch, didn't ask, just nodded once like this was a storm we'd weather together, and held the door open. Inside, the silence was immense. Not empty, expectant. Philip moved through the hallway like someone walking inside a memory. He traced the grooves in the wood, paused at the hanging family portraits, stopped in front of the photo I hadn't had the strength to take down. "That's my dad," he said. His voice was so certain it nearly buckled my knees. "Yes," I whispered. "It is." At dinner, I set the table for two. My hand shook, not from fear, but from realizing how long it had been since that table had held hope. Philip sat politely, eyes darting, watching. He barely touched the food. Not because he didn't want it, but because he wasn't sure he was allowed. "You can ask anything here," I said, soft but sure. His eyebrows lifted. "Even if it's weird, especially if it's weird." His smile was small, but it reached both cheeks, and something in my chest unclenched. That night, I tucked him into the guest room, a room I'd already started calling his. The bed was too big for his frame, but he didn't seem to mind. As I pulled the door to, I heard him whisper to the bear, "We have a bed now. We made it." I stood in the hallway, pressed my forehead against the frame, and wept. Not out of pain, but out of the sudden, stunning relief of being given something back I never thought I'd find. But the world outside our little haven wasn't ready to understand. By morning, word had spread like wildfire across the valley. The first knock came just after noon, Margaret Daniels with her too tight smile and her peach cobbler. "Thought you might want company." She barely lasted 3 minutes before her eyes flicked to the boy. "And who's this darling?" "He's my son," I said. The words tasted strange. Not wrong, just new. Her smile froze. She blinked too fast. "Oh, I didn't know you had a child." "I didn't. Now I do." By sunset, the whispers curled like smoke over every fence post in town. That I was covering up an affair? That Philip was the result of some long-buried scandal? That I'd lost my mind, or worse, my morals? I didn't respond, not in words. But every morning, I laced up my boots, fed the animals, took Philip out to walk the rows with me, showed him how to hold the watering hose, how to tell a healthy leaf from a sick one. Let him laugh. Let him ask questions. Let him exist fully. Because he wasn't a mistake. He wasn't a shameful secret or a community rumor. He was mine now. Not because I gave birth to him, but because I chose him. Because love, when it's real, doesn't ask for permission. One morning, as the fog rolled off the fields, Philip ran out ahead of me. He turned back, cheeks flushed, arms wide like he could fly. "Miss Anna," he shouted, "this place is magic." And I realized he was right. Not because it was easy, but because it was honest. This boy, this quiet miracle, would not be buried under someone else's shame. He would grow wild and free and loud, right here, with me, in the only place that still dared to remember what love looks like after the storm. The questions didn't stay whispers for long. It began with a church elder asking too gently if I needed help navigating a complicated situation. Then came a phone call from the local school requesting formal guardian documentation for Philip. Not long after, a social worker arrived, citing concerns raised anonymously. I understood immediately. The town wasn't just watching, it was circling. They wanted answers, clean ones. the kind that fit neatly into their narrow definitions of who I was supposed to be: widow victim, tragic quiet. But not this, not a mother overnight, not someone who took on a dead man's legacy and called it her own. So I met with a lawyer, filed emergency guardianship papers, drafted a sworn affidavit, and submitted Michael's will, hidden deep in an envelope at the back of our pantry, dated 6 months before his death. To my son Philip, born of silence but raised in hope. That was his final admission. I carried it to the school board, the church, the sheriff. I looked them in the eyes and said, "You can question my choices, but don't question his blood, or mine." The gossip shifted after that. Now they called me stubborn, cold, dangerous. But the stares no longer mattered. Every morning, Philip ran barefoot through the fields. He fed the chickens. He painted the barn doors blue. He called me Mom, not because I asked him to, because I stayed. Still, there were nights I curled up on the kitchen floor whispering to Michael's ghost, "You should have told me. You should have prepared me." But deep down, I knew he hadn't kept Philip from me to hurt me. He'd done it to protect the boy from a world too quick to judge. And maybe, just maybe, from the version of me that wasn't ready. But I was ready now. So when the social worker returned, I was waiting. He has a stable home. He eats. He sleeps. He smiles. I won't let this town chew him up to make itself feel righteous. She left in silence. And for the first time since Michael died, something inside me shifted. Not peace power. I was no longer the woman left behind. I was the one who stayed and fought and kept the future alive. But then the letter came folded in a plain envelope, no return address, just my name in blocky, unfamiliar print. Inside, one grainy photo and a sentence that struck like lightning. Michael holding a baby, not Philip. A girl. The note read, "She's alive too. You weren't the only one he left behind." I dropped the photo, heart pounding. Michael hadn't kept just one child from me. He'd kept 2. Or more. My hands trembled as I picked up the picture again, trying to place the background. A church, a park somewhere almost familiar. I ran to the barn, tore open the old cabinet, searching, praying. Then I found it, a second file hidden in the corner. Smaller, slimmer. Ava, born 2011. My knees gave out. I crumpled to the floor, clutching the file. Inside photos, school reports, a bracelet with her name. She existed, and he never told me. Michael had layered lie upon lie until even our love felt like a question. I wanted to scream, to destroy it all, but then I saw Philip's boots by the door. He needed me, and maybe, just maybe, Eva would too. This time, I wasn't waiting for the storm. I was going to walk into it and find the truth no matter what it cost. Spring came late that year. The fields thawed slow, as if unsure they deserved warmth again. I knew the feeling. But something had shifted, not just in the land, in me. For the first time, I stopped referring to the farm as ours. Not because I wanted to erase Michael, but because the we he and I once built no longer existed. What remained, what endured, was mine. And I was no longer just a widow tending to ghosts. I was a mother. I was a steward. I was the future no one had prepared me for. But was I ready for all of it? Could I carry a legacy that wasn't mine to begin with and still make it my own? Was it betrayal to change what Michael had started? Or was it survival? Neighbors still called me Michael's wife when they thought I couldn't hear. But I didn't flinch anymore. Because every nail I drove into a new fence, every decision I made about the crop rotation, every call I took from the state agriculture board was mine. Not borrowed, not inherited, claimed. Still, I wondered sometimes, was I honoring his memory or rewriting it? Philip started school. He made friends. He laughed without hesitation now. Sometimes he asked about his dad. I never lied. I told him Michael had been brave and complicated and loved him more than life, but that he had made mistakes too. Like what Philip asked one night, his voice barely above a whisper. Like keeping you a secret, I said. But not because he was ashamed, because he was scared. Are you scared? I thought about it. How many nights I'd stood in the hallway with tears brimming the weight of expectations pressing against my spine. Sometimes, I said. But I do it anyway. That's what being brave means. He nodded, like he understood, and I realized I wasn't raising Michael's son anymore. I was raising my own, but even as I said that, I questioned it. Was I enough for him? Could I ever give him the kind of family he deserved, when mine had been built on hidden truths? The townsfolk slowly adjusted. Some apologized, some didn't. It didn't matter. I no longer needed their permission to exist. I started leading workshops on sustainable farming, spoke at a women's conference in Austin, applied for a grant to turn part of the farm into a learning center for single mothers and their kids. They asked what inspired me. Grief, I said, but not the kind that breaks you, the kind that remakes you. Because the truth was this: I would never stop loving Michael, but I wasn't his shadow anymore. I was Anna Whitmore, and finally that was enough. Or was it? Would it always be enough? Could I keep growing from this soil, scarred as it was, and still believe in something new? As spring deepened, the fields greened under my feet. I looked out every morning at the land I fought to hold and asked myself, what else can I build? What legacy can I plant? Not for Michael, not for the town, but for me and for Philip. The wind didn't answer, but I didn't need it to, because I had found something stronger than certainty. I had found purpose. It began with a letter. Unmarked envelope. No return address. Just her name, Anna Whitmore, scrawled in handwriting that quivered with history. Inside one page, torn from a notebook. The ink smudged the words too careful. Anna, if you found Philip, then I was right to hope. There's more you need to know. Please meet me. For him. For you. Elizabeth. Michael's ghost came back with her name. Anna read the letter over and over beneath the kitchen light, heart clenching with each pass. Her pulse thudded in her ears. The name that had haunted her grief now begged for attention. She asked herself, why now? Why not years ago, when the ache was fresh, when the confusion had teeth? It wasn't curiosity that pulled her in, it was duty. To Philip, to truth. 3 days later, she drove south. Elizabeth lived in a worn-out trailer on the outskirts of Waco. The yard was tidy, the steps freshly painted. There were wind chimes that didn't sing, as if even the breeze didn't dare speak here. Anna hesitated before knocking. What was she really expecting? Confession, closure, confrontation. When Elizabeth opened the door, she looked older than Anna had imagined. Not weak, not frail, just worn like a photograph left too long in the sun. Life had chiseled her down to only what was necessary. You came? She said. He's my son, Anna replied, eyes steady. I'd go through fire for him. Inside, the air smelled like lavender and ash. They sat across from each other in a small living room crowded with silence. On the coffee table, Elizabeth laid down a folder, its edges soft with handling. Inside, medical records, photos, court filings, and something that made Anna's breath catch a restraining order. Michael didn't keep him from you out of guilt, Elizabeth said. He kept him safe from my ex. From the man who made Philip's first years hell. Anna's heart twisted. The betrayal she'd nursed for months shifted, became something else. Complicated, sharp, painful, but also human. He helped us disappear. Sent money. Checked in every week. He told Philip about you, about the woman he wished had been his mother from the start. Anna felt her throat close. She looked at the pictures, one of Philip in a hospital gown, barely 4. Another of him smiling, missing front teeth. Michael crouched beside him. "Why didn't you come to me when he died?" Anna asked. The question came out ragged raw. Elizabeth looked down. "I wanted to. But I was afraid you'd hate him. Or worse, hate the boy. I waited for a sign that you were ready. And then I saw your name in the paper, the farm, the school. You were building something steady enough to hold him." They talked for hours. Not all of it was easy. Some of it reopened wounds. But in the space between pain and patience, something else formed: understanding. As Anna stood to leave, Elizabeth reached into a drawer and handed her a second envelope. "Give it to Philip when you think he's strong enough. It's not an apology, it's a map. To who he came from and what he survived." Anna took it with trembling hands. The drive home was long, silent. She caught her own reflection in the rearview mirror, older than she remembered, but also steadier. In the back of her mind, the question echoed: had she judged too quickly, held onto her grief like armor? At home, she didn't go inside right away. She stood on the porch with the envelope in her coat pocket, staring out across the vineyard. The vines were just beginning to stretch upward again, tentative, brave. Inside, Philip was drawing at the kitchen table. He looked up when she entered and grinned with a gap-toothed smile. "You're back. Did you find the answers?" Anna knelt beside him, brushed a curl from his cheek, and kissed the top of his head. "I found a beginning." That night, after Philip was asleep, she sat in the living room with the envelope on her lap, staring at it like it might burst into flames. Was she ready to share it? Would he be ready to receive it? She didn't know. But she knew this. The truth was no longer a weapon. It was a thread. One that connected the past to the present, not to bind her down, but to show her the path forward. And whatever came next, she would walk it. Not as a grieving widow, not as a forgotten wife, but as Anna Whitmore, a mother, a builder, a woman no longer waiting for the world to decide who she was. This time, she already knew. It happened one quiet evening, long after the house had settled, and the wind had tucked itself beneath the wheat fields. The kind of stillness that only comes after survival, after choosing to stay. Philip had fallen asleep on the couch, his legs tangled in a blanket, a dog-eared science book rising and falling with each breath. The soft hum of the old refrigerator kept time with the clock on the mantel. Outside, the wind rustled through the dry stalks like a hymn only the land could sing. And in that stillness, Anna sat, one hand on her tea, the other resting on the envelope. She had been many things in this house. A blushing bride with dirt under her nails. A quiet widow too polite to scream at the ceiling. A shadow of questions that no one dared to ask. But now she was something entirely different. A woman who rebuilt without applause. A mother not by blood, but by choice and by fire. A keeper of broken things made whole. She hadn't opened the letter from Elizabeth yet. It remained sealed, stored in the desk drawer like a coiled truth waiting for the right hour. Tonight, she held it not to read, but to remember. To feel its weight. To honor the road that had brought her here. Not all legacies are passed down, she thought. Some are carved from silence, from staying when you had every reason to run. The grant had come through. The learning center would begin construction in spring. Not a large building, not fancy, but a place carved into the bones of the farm, a space for women like her, like Elizabeth, like the version of herself she used to be, lost. pushed aside, still standing. She had written the mission statement herself, fingers trembling but certain to honor survival, to amplify voices, to teach strength not as stoicism, but as choice. Was she strong? People said so. They meant it as praise. But the truth was more complicated. Was she strong when she buried Michael alone, with no one daring to speak his son's name? Was she strong when she curled on the kitchen floor, whispering apologies to a ghost that no longer owed her anything? Was she strong the first time she said "my son" in public and felt the burn of judgment instead of warmth? Or maybe strength wasn't in the declaration, but in the decision to keep showing up anyway. Philip stirred in his sleep and mumbled something about constellations. She smiled, walked over, and pulled the blanket tighter around him. His face, so much of Michael, but also something entirely new, reminded her that the future never waits for our permission. It simply arrives, demanding to be raised. Her phone buzzed beside her. An invitation, the Regional Leadership Conference on Rural Community Development. Keynote slot. They wanted her to speak. 3 years ago, she wouldn't have even read the full email. But now, without hesitation, she clicked accept, because she wasn't just Anna Whitmore anymore. She was proof. That silence could grow into voice. That loss could be composted into purpose. That being erased didn't mean you couldn't write yourself back in. At the conference, dressed in boots and her father's patched denim jacket, she stood in front of a room full of strangers and told them the truth. They'll define you by what you lost, what broke you, who walked away. But survival is not weakness. It's defiance. And the most radical thing a woman can do after being shattered is build something. She looked out at the crowd, at the women nodding, the men shifting in their chairs, the interns furiously scribbling notes. "I am not here because I plan to be," she said. "I'm here because I stayed. I stayed on the land. I stayed with the child. I stayed with the mess. And I made something of it." The applause didn't move her. Not really. What moved her was what came after. A woman approached her middle-aged hands, calloused voice shaking. "You said what I didn't know I needed to hear. I thought I was the only one." Anna took her hands. "You're never the only one." Later, back home, Philip ran out to meet her at the gate, waving a drawing in his hand. "It's our house," he said. "And me? And you? And look, there's a big sign." She looked at the crayon lettering. "Home." "What's the sign for?" she asked. "For everyone who doesn't know they can come here yet," he said. Anna smiled, and finally she opened the letter from Elizabeth. She read every line, not because she needed more truth, but because she was strong enough now to carry it. And that more than anything was her legacy. The refusal to vanish, the choice to stay, to build, to become. It sat in her drawer for weeks, folded, sealed, still untouched. That envelope. Late at night, when the house was silent and the wheat fields held their breath, Anna would pull it next to her fingertips, tracing the delicate script, Philip Whitmore Carr. His name written with trembling hope and apology. Each curve of ink felt like a fragile promise waiting to be fulfilled. The world had shifted. The seasons rolled forward. Philip had grown, voice-deepening questions sharper about his father, his face, his story. The envelope was no longer a choice. It was a reckoning. On a crisp autumn afternoon, the sky bruised in muted purples and golds, Anna called him into the sunroom. Light spilled across the floorboards as leaves skittered in the wake of gusting wind. "Philip," she said, voice steady, "can we talk?" He curled into his favorite armchair, the one under the skylight knees pulled close. His eyes, Michael's eyes held both innocence and wariness, as though he sensed the weight ahead. Anna placed the envelope on the table, its edges aligned like a challenge. His eyes flicked to it and froze. "This is from your mother." Silence. Heavy, electric. His small hand hovered trembling at the edge. "I thought you were my mom," he whispered. Her heart clenched. It had broken before tonight. Now it shattered again, sharp, irrevocable. "I am," she said, "and I always will be. But before me there was someone else, someone who carried you, who tried so hard to protect you." He picked it up as though touching something sacred. The world held its breath with him. "Does it mean you're not mad at her?" She exhaled. The question held a universe of pain. "I was," Anna admitted, voice raw. "For a long time, I was angry. I felt betrayed. But I've learned that sometimes people act out of fear, out of love that's twisted by desperation. And sometimes they're just afraid." Lightning cracked overhead, loud and close. The room shimmered. The wheat fields outside pulsed with sudden wind. The moment felt cosmic, like the sky itself demanded some kind of truth. Philip opened the envelope. Inside, a letter in shaking handwriting, a photo of her mother, cradling a crying newborn Philip, and a pressed daisy, wilted but carefully preserved. He read, eyes gliding across lines he didn't fully understand, but felt deeply in his bones. Then he looked at her. No words, just a lean, his head against her shoulder. The storm outside echoed their silent reunion. "Can I still call you Mom?" he asked, voice small. Tears gathered, not of grief, but of fierce relief. "Always," she whispered. And in that moment, everything shifted. They hadn't broken. They had rooted deeper. Night fell. The storm raged outside. Anna stayed beside him as he wrote a response, a careful note spit between hope and apology. He sealed it himself, his chin trembling. She didn't cry. She held him as he placed it in the mailbox at dawn, face pale but determined. That morning, the air smelled like new beginnings and burnt wheat. Neighbors would whisper, the boy's writing on a letter to his real mother, they'd wonder. Judge. But Philip walked with purpose, holding his mother's hand, not the one who birthed him, but the one who chose him. And Anna. She walked with him, chest open, heart unapologetic. Because the most explosive kind of love isn't a storm that breaks you. It's the one that breaks you open so something new can grow. For days, the envelope sat on the kitchen table like a question no one dared to ask. Its twins sent and received crossed miles and stitched two broken timelines into one. But within the quiet hum of daily life, something unspoken had begun to shift. Philip didn't mention the letter again. He woke up each morning, brushed his teeth, fed the hens, and packed his school bag like any other 12-year-old boy. But Anna saw it in the way he paused before answering simple questions, in how he lingered on the porch watching the sky, and in how he flinched ever so slightly when she used the word home. There was a weight to him now. Not sorrow, not grief, but awareness. A slow expansion of self. Anna didn't push. She knew what it was to carry too many truths at once, and the silence they demanded to breathe. So she let him drift in and out of his own thoughts like a boy testing the tide before jumping in. Then came the night he slipped into her room, holding a drawing sketched hastily in pencil and smudged at the edges. A crooked house. A woman with long hair standing in the doorway. A boy with a telescope. And in the far corner, a second woman, smaller shaded in, but unmistakably present. "That's you," he said, pointing to the first woman. "And that's her. I didn't leave her out. I just didn't put her in the middle, because she didn't stay." Anna felt her chest twist, not with pain, but with something deeper. Recognition. Acceptance. She took the drawing, pinned it to the fridge, and kissed his forehead. "I like our story," he whispered. She nodded. "Me too." That spring, they dug up the old corner of the backyard, turned over stubborn clay, and planted herbs and tomatoes. Philip suggested sunflowers. "They always turn toward the light," he said. Anna smiled. Maybe they would too. But peace didn't come without fire. One morning, a letter arrived. From Elizabeth. Anna opened it alone. Inside were 2 items, a thank you note for sharing Philip's letter and a warning. Elizabeth had been approached by someone claiming to be Philip's biological grandfather, a man she had a restraining order against for years. Somehow, he had found them. Anna's blood went cold. She contacted her lawyer, updated the school about visitation policies, and added a camera to the front gate. Every smile that spring came with a shadow. Every knock at the door made her heart jolt. Philip noticed. "Am I in danger?" he asked one night. Anna didn't lie. "I don't know yet, but I won't let anything happen to you." And she meant it, fiercely, without hesitation, because he wasn't just someone she loved. He was someone she had chosen again and again, every day. They continued therapy. Philip asked harder questions. Why did she keep me away? Did Dad ever want me to live with him? Anna didn't have all the answers, but she gave him the only truth she knew. Love isn't always clean, Philip. Sometimes it's tangled up in fear, but you were never unwanted. One evening, after a particularly difficult session, Philip crawled into her lap like he hadn't done in years. "When will we be normal?" he asked. Anna looked down at him, her voice soft. "Maybe normal isn't what we were meant for. Maybe we were meant to be something stronger." The envelope on the fridge began to yellow at the edges. The drawing faded from pencil gray to ghost white. But it stayed, as a testament, as a scar. And one night, as Anna stood in the garden under a bruised summer sky, she whispered aloud, "You didn't just save me, Philip. You remade me, not with answers, but with your questions." Because healing wasn't a ribboned finish line. It was a door that opened again and again, and this time when it opened, Anna didn't brace for pain. She walked through it, with him. It didn't begin with a plan. It began with a laugh, unexpected, unpolished, real. Philip had told a joke terribly and with too much confidence, and Anna laughed. Not politely, not out of habit, but fully, tears welling in her eyes. This time, they weren't tears of grief. They were something else entirely. Joy. It startled her like recognizing a familiar face you thought you'd never see again. Joy, the emotion she had once treated like a guest she couldn't afford, had returned. And it hadn't come alone. It brought with it a quiet entourage, hope, wonder, the faint but insistent pull of anticipation. Suddenly, she was making lists, not of things to fix or appointments to keep, but of places she longed to visit, recipes she wanted to try, stories waiting to be written. She signed up for a local writing workshop, curious what her voice would sound like when it wasn't speaking from the hollow place of loss. It wasn't about ambition. It wasn't even about healing. It was about breath, about becoming. Then one day, Philip brought home a flyer. "A youth science camp. It's in Colorado," he said. "Can we go? Just for the summer?" Anna looked at him, saw the quiet hope in his eyes, and smiled. "We'll figure it out," she said, and for the first time in a long time she meant it. She no longer feared saying yes to things that might not last, because she had finally learned something essential. Joy, like grief, deserves its place. So she painted the sunroom in a soft, defiant yellow. She kept a journal. She submitted an application to speak at a regional women's leadership forum, not as the widow, not as the woman who raised someone else's child, but simply as Anna Whitmore. One quiet evening, as the sky bruised into twilight, she and Philip sat on the back porch, watching the hills swallow the sun. "Do you think you'll get married again?" He asked, the words light, almost floating. She paused, then answered without hesitation. "I don't know. Maybe. But I think I'm finally in love with my life, and that's a good place to be." He nodded. "Me too." She draped an arm around his shoulders. The silence between them was soft now, not heavy, no longer filled with unspoken grief or imagined futures. Just air, just sky, just two people who had chosen over and over again to keep going, to keep choosing. The shadows still came sometimes. Not every day was bright. But when darkness knocked now, it found her surrounded by light. And for the first time, in what felt like forever, she wasn't bracing for the next fall. She was reaching forward. It didn't begin with a grand plan or a revelation. It began with laughter. Philip had just told the worst joke Anna had ever heard, something about atoms and a sandwich. It didn't even make sense. But he delivered it with such unwavering confidence, such unfiltered joy, that she burst into laughter. Real, unguarded laughter, the kind she hadn't known she could still produce. Tears filled her eyes, but not from sorrow. This time, it was something different. Something long-forgotten joy. It startled her. That emotion she had once treated like a fragile luxury had returned, not demanding, but offering. And with it came others' hope, wonder, anticipation. Feelings that had once seemed like distant relatives now came knocking barefoot and bold, ready to stay a while. She started making lists, not of debts or crop rotations, but of dreams. Places to visit, books to read, recipes to try, stories to write. She enrolled in a local writing workshop not because she needed it, but because she wanted to know what her voice sounded like when it wasn't shaped by pain. One afternoon, Philip brought home a flyer for a youth science camp. "It's in Colorado," he said. "Can we go?" Just for the summer, Anna held the paper. It was bright and full of promise. She looked at him wide-eyed and expectant. "We'll figure it out," she said. And this time, she meant it, without fear, without calculating the fallout. She painted the sunroom yellow. She pulled out old journals and filled them with new pages. She applied to speak at a regional women's leadership forum, not as the widow of Michael Whitmore, not as the woman who raised a child born from another life, but as herself. Anna Whitmore. One evening, as they sat on the back porch watching the sky bleed into oranges and purples, Philip asked, "Do you think you'll get married again?" She blinked, then smiled. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Maybe. But I think I'm finally in love with my life. And that's a good place to be." Philip nodded, pulling his knees to his chest. "Me too," he said. "I think Dad would have liked us like this." Anna didn't cry. She reached out and pulled him close. "I think he would have loved us like this." But peace, they both learned, didn't come unchallenged. The gossip wasn't gone. Whispers still rose at the market. Some folks still narrowed their eyes, still called her Michael's ghost wife behind closed doors. But none of that reached her anymore. Because she had built something stronger than validation. She had built a life. That spring, they planted a new section of the garden, not for survival, but for beauty. Sunflowers, marigolds, bluebells. Things that had no function but to bloom. And one day, in front of a packed auditorium, Anna stood behind a podium and said, "For years, I thought strength was about survival, about gritting your teeth through pain, keeping your head down, enduring. But I was wrong. True strength is choosing joy after loss, choosing light after shadow. True strength is building again, even when you know it could all fall apart." The applause was thunderous. She returned home that night to find Philip asleep on the couch, a new science book tucked under his cheek. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "We're still building." And for the first time, she didn't see herself as a survivor of tragedy. She saw herself as the architect of her own future, not defined by what was taken, but by what she dared to reclaim. Not just Anna Whitmore, but Anna, whole, bright, and rising. It was a small wedding. No tuxedos, no aisle. Just Anna barefoot in the orchard holding Christopher's hands as the wind stirred the blossoms above them. Philip stood beside them, the ring bearer and best man, smiling in that quiet, proud way he'd grown into. The twins, Olive and Reed, gurgled in their aunt's arms the newest roots in a life that had been replanted. "I never thought joy could look like this," Anna whispered as Christopher kissed her. "That's because you never gave yourself permission to dream this far," he replied. And it was true. The farm had flourished. Tomatoes hung heavy on the vines. Bees hummed between rows of lavender. Neighbors came not just to buy produce, but to listen to learn. Anna had begun writing again small essays on love-grief growth. People read them like prayers. Philip, now taller than her, helped with everything, feeding chickens, packing boxes, reading to his younger siblings. He called them his people. And in his eyes, Anna saw something whole. Not a patchwork, not a second chance. A family. One afternoon, Anna found an old photograph in a drawer, her and Michael on their wedding day. She looked at it for a long time, then gently placed it into a memory box. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not for the pain, but for the path." Christopher saw her do it. He didn't ask questions, just handed her a new frame, one that would soon hold their first family photo, all four of them beneath the apple tree. As autumn came, the air turned crisp and golden. Anna walked through the fields at sunset, watching Philip race Olive down the hill and hearing Reed's giggle from the porch swing. And for once, there was no shadow waiting at the edge of joy. Only light. She had lived a dozen lifetimes in one. But this was the one she chose. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Do you ever feel like you have to let go of the past to truly live in the present? Yes. Life is never peaceful forever. I used to think I had dug deep enough into the old years to find the source. But today, while cleaning Michael's old room, I found a small box cleverly hidden behind the wooden wall. Inside was only a single piece of paper, no letter, no photo, just a copy of a birth certificate. But the name listed under Mother was not Elizabeth. I sat still for hours, paper in hand, and yet my heart did not waver. Maybe I had never really slept well, and a question rose in my mind: would I keep silent or open the door that had been locked for so many years? Haven't I already written somewhere an even more shocking story? And do you know who is listed under Mother? If you do, leave your answer in the comments. I truly hope you're curious to find out. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Late one evening, Anna is alone in her office reviewing Philip's early childhood paperwork and Elizabeth's letter when her old phone flashes an incoming call from an unknown number. "We need to meet. There are things you don't know yet, and your daughter does too." The caller won't identify herself, but gives an address outside the city 2 hours away. Alarm and curiosity flood Anna at once. She glances at Philip sleeping upstairs and steels herself. This is another truth she must dig into alone. Under the empty night sky, she drives. The headlights carve a path through darkness and doubt. She arrives at a worn suburban house. Inside, she meets a nurse named Diane, mid-50s, with haunted eyes and an envelope of photos. "These were left by Michael," Diane explains softly. There's another child, a little girl born a year before Philip, but her mother is not Elizabeth. Anna's breath catches. Diane reveals that the girl now named Kara was cared for under a false name until authorities close the case. She hands Anna a final letter from Michael. Anna, she is my daughter too. I couldn't protect her from this world, but I chose you to find her. A photograph reveals a small blonde girl clutching a ragged teddy in a hospital crib, eyes identical to Michael's. Kara's unexpected existence rattles Anna's world anew. Morning light finds Anna back on the farm, where she quietly gathers Joseph and Christopher. I have another child of Michael's. I'm bringing her home. Joseph blinks but nods. Christopher, still sleepy, murmurs his support. Anna steels herself. This time the farm won't be just what memory holds. It will become a home for all of Michael's children. The part ends with Anna standing in dawn's glow, her wedding ring warm on her finger, holding the photograph of Kara against her chest. Another journey begins. Kara arrives shy and silent, carrying a small backpack. Anna shows her to a room upstairs, blankets soft and familiar. A framed photo of Michael and the child together sits on the desk. Kara's lips part, and Anna realizes this is just the first greeting of many. In the late afternoon, Anna leads both children out to the vineyard, where Philip is spraying vines. He stops and blinks at Kara. Who's she? He asks quietly. That's your sister, Anna answers gently. Another child of Michael's and yours too. Between rows of vines, the three stand in silence. Anna takes both their hands and declares, "Here, everyone belongs. No secrets." In the following days, farm life unfolds into organized chaos, tools, chores, laughter, shy smiles. Philip grows confident in his role as protector. Kara slowly opens up. Anna reads to them under orchard trees, shares stories of Michael's dedication to the land, but also his fears and imperfections. The truth becomes their soil for healing. Kara offers her first memory of her mother's hands at her crib, of a lullaby sung once, of being placed gently in an older brother's crib. Anna cries quietly, holding her daughter for the first time. The crescendo arrives during the farm's annual harvest festival. Anna stands before the gathered valley residents, farmer neighbors, curious locals, and workshop attendees with Philip and Kara at her side. In the glow of lanterns, "This is my family," she announces. "I have 2 children of Michael's. Philip, you know him?" Kara: "I only met her recently, but she belongs here now with us. We are not a perfect family. We are not what people expected, but we are honest." Silence falls, then applause begins. Some faces soften, others remain stern. Anna sees old Margaret weeping softly. Later, a boy from school shyly asks if he can call Kara sis. Anna's heart swells. That night, they gather by the bonfire. Philip teases Kara about chasing fireflies. Kara laughs, chin against Anna's shoulder. Christopher gently touches Anna's arm, offering silent support. Anna watches as the children run through the dark field, bonfire embers floating like fireflies. She breathes in the night sky, the same that once felt endless in grief, now feels full of possibility. She whispers into the wind, "Thank you, Michael, for every secret and truth. Because of them, this is our family." Under that starry sky, with laughter, dirt under their nails, and honest tears, they begin to plant new roots. The land, once haunted by loss, now resonates with hope and redemption. The wind had changed. It no longer howled like sorrow through the beams of the old farmhouse. It breathed, now slow and sure, like something that had learned how to stay. Anna stood barefoot on the porch, mug in hand, watching the vineyard stretch beneath the gold spill of evening. There was no ache in her chest, only a fullness that demanded no explanation. The land hummed not with ghosts, but with memory repurposed. Inside, the house moved. Children laughed. pots boiled. A dog barked at squirrels, and somewhere upstairs, Kara hummed off-key as she brushed Olive's hair into lopsided pigtails. This wasn't the life Anna had asked for. It was the one she'd chosen again and again through betrayal, through storms, through questions no one else dared ask. She had once measured time by loss. Now she measured it by growth. Tomato harvests, first day of school nerves, sunflowers turned toward the sky, letters received, and letters still unsent. There were still shadows Elizabeth's name in a letter that hadn't yellowed yet. Eva's face in a photo still unanswered. The looming shape of a man claiming to be Philip's grandfather still circling in the background. But shadows were no longer feared here. They were compost. The house knew every stage of her becoming wife-widow-mother, by fire builder, by necessity. Now it bore her name with quiet strength. Anna Whitmore. Not Michael's wife. Not the woman who stayed. Just Anna. Still here. Still choosing. She looked down at her soiled, dark hands. She no longer clutched things to survive. Now she planted them. In the learning center she had built from the bones of the old barn, they gathered women with toddlers on their hips, with laughter too loud or eyes too quiet, some with scars hidden beneath long sleeves, and years of silence. Anna stood at the front, holding a worn page from her notebook, her voice steady as she read aloud, "You're not weak because you stayed. You're not unworthy because you were once invisible. And survival, when done out loud, is revolution." The applause came soft and respectful, but it wasn't what mattered. What mattered came after, when the room had settled and women lingered in doorways hesitating before asking the questions they'd never said aloud. Did you forgive him? Did you ever stop being angry? How do you raise a child born from betrayal? Anna's answer never changed. You show up. You tell the truth. And you don't let the world tell you who your family is. That night, as cicadas hummed outside and the porch creaked beneath familiar weight, Philip crawled beside her, taller, now more shadow than boy. "Do you ever think we're strange?" he asked. Anna smiled, eyes on the stars. "Absolutely, and absolutely worth it." They sat shoulder to shoulder, wrapped in the kind of quiet that doesn't need filling. The stars blinked above them like old friends. Then his voice cracked the stillness, low and unsure. "Do you still miss him?" She didn't flinch. "Yes, but not the way I used to. Not like an absence. More like a thread, something woven into everything that stayed." A pause, then more carefully, "Would you have stayed if you'd known the whole truth at the start?" She turned to him, met his gaze without hesitation. "I don't know. But I know this, I would still choose you." The next morning, under a sky still holding on to dawn, they painted a sign together and nailed it by the road that led to the farm. Philip had chosen the name. The second route. Beneath it, in Anna's careful handwriting, open to all who were told to start over. The neighbors still whispered. The social workers still dropped by. But every week, more came: single mothers, half-siblings, kids with no last names, no map, only the ache for belonging. And the front door, it never closed again. Not to ghosts. Not to secrets. Not to anyone still searching for a place that whispered, "You're allowed to stay. And you don't have to be perfect to be home."